Alright folks, this is our jointer, okay? Just some parts of the jointer before we get started on actually what it does. Alright, there's an in-feed bed and an out-feed bed. Okay, this looks like one big long table, but in reality there's two different beds that this in-feed side is just about a 1/16 of an inch lower than the out-feed bed. Okay, and you'll see why in a minute here. This part right here is called the fence. Alright, we have what the industry kind of terms a pork chop guard, basically because it looks like a pork chop. Alright, but it is a guard that protects us from the cutter head, which is underneath. Okay, this is a very similar style cutter head as to what's on a planer, except obviously this is smaller. This one's 8 inches, the planer has a 24-inch cutter head. Okay, the cutter head spins this direction, and it's got 3 knives in it, okay, that cut the edge of the board. Alright, so does anyone know what the purpose of a joiner is? What is it actually designed to do? Yeah. Go ahead.
Smooth out the sides.
Okay, smooths the sides. What else?
Very clean surface for joint two boards together.
Okay, for gluing edges together, you need a nice clean surface. Do you guys remember the board I showed you yesterday that was right from the sawmill and had those really rough edges and really rough surfaces? Okay, obviously when you cut a tree down, it doesn't have a perfect edge like this, right? So the jointer will be responsible for making not only a smooth edge, but perfectly straight, and also 90 degrees to the surface of the board. Okay, our fence is set right now at 90 degrees. It can be adjusted for anywhere from 90 to 45 degrees, depending on what type of project you're doing. Most of the time, we keep it set right at 90 degrees. Okay. Now, we talked yesterday with the planer about a minimum length the board needs to be. On the jointer, this needs to be a minimum of 12 inches. And I've painted a red stripe right across the fence. So if you're unsure if you have the correct length, you could just simply hold your board over the red stripe. If it's longer than the red stripe, you're good to go. Okay? What do you guys think could happen if we ran a board that was too short across the jointer?
It's not good cut.
What's that?
It's not good cut.
It'll cut. What could happen though?
It won't go all the way through.
It might not go all the way through, but chances are, because that board's so short, you don't have control of it, and it might kick back. The cutter head might grab it and throw it back towards you. Alright, so you always make sure that the board is long enough. Now, yesterday we also talked about the grain direction. Which way did we run the grain going through the planer? Anyone remember? Okay, in the same direction that it goes into the machine, right? So it's the same thing with the jointer. We always run the grain in the same direction we're moving the board. Okay? We never ever joint the end grain, meaning going across the lines in the wood. Anyone know why? Some of you have used the jointer before.
Split it.
Okay, it actually will split it. The fibers of the wood are very much like, if you guys imagine a bunch of drinking straws. Okay? If you take a bunch of drinking straws in a group together and you ran your hand down the side of the drinking straws, is it smooth? Yeah, it's pretty smooth, right? But what would happen if you ran your hand across the top of those drinking straws? What will they do? They'll kind of spread apart, right? Well, that's exactly what the wood does. If you go and cut across the grain, when you get towards the end of the board, right about here, the board will split, and that big chunk of wood is going to go flying all the way to the back of the wall. All right, so not only is it dangerous, but it's going to ruin the piece you're working on anyway. So we always joint the edges, the grain going with the same direction you're moving the board. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. Now let's talk a little bit about hand placement. All right, it's very important that our hands stay clear of that cutter head, right? So if our left hand is like this, you have your thumb on top of the board, okay? That kind of helps keep your hand from slipping. Also, your fingers are pushing the board down against the bed, up against the fence, okay? Your other hand should be back here, again, on top of the board, all right? Now, if we have a board that is not quite as big as this one, it's a little bit shorter, like this, or a little narrower, I should say. All right, same thing. You're going to have your thumb and fingers like this. Your right hand should wrap around the back of the fence. Anyone want to take a guess why?
Because if it's on the wood, then you could have like a pinch spot.
You could have a what spot?
You know where it pinches your hand.
Okay. Oh, pinch point, like
Yeah.
from yesterday. Maybe, possibly.
To have control of the board.
Okay, this is the best way to control the board. Some of you were taught to hold it like this. The problem with that is if you slip, okay, see how you can lose control that way? All right, if you have your thumb and fingers like this and your other hand's wrapping around the back of the fence, there's no possible way you could slip and go into that cutter head, right? Okay, now to actually joint the edge of a board, our start-stop switch is here. I'm going to hold the board up against the fence, down against the bed, and I'm going to walk with my board across the machine. I'm not going to stand in one place. All right, so here we go. Okay? So it may seem like nothing was really done, just like yesterday, but really we've taken about 1/16 of an inch off, and we've made sure that this edge is perfectly 90 degrees to this surface. Okay? All right, now, as far as the hands go, I just showed you guys the correct way to hold your hands. I want to talk about some improper ways to place your hands where you could possibly, or you will actually get hurt. Okay? If you were to do this, where your finger is touching the bed of the jointer, what do you think will happen? If I'm using my finger all the way, touching the bed, I'm pushing the board through.
You cut your finger off.
Okay, if you're taking 1/16 of an inch off the edge of the board, how much is going to come off that finger? 1/16 of an inch. Okay, the machine doesn't know any different. So is that a preventable accident?
Yes.
Okay. Gentleman that my dad went to school with, high school, he's now 60 years old. He did just that. His teacher never really talked about not placing your fingers on the bed of the jointer. And he was pushing the board along with his middle finger, ran his finger across the cutter head, and to this day, he's 60 years old, he puts a plastic cap over the end of his finger and puts a new bandage on every morning. Okay? So, totally preventable, all right, but that affected him for the rest of his life. Okay? Another thing I want to talk about is sometimes when you're running this, the board will get stuck on the outfeed bed. Okay? What do you guys think you should do if that board gets stuck on the outfeed bed? What's that?
Pull it up.
Okay, lift it straight up. Perfect. All right, you could go back, lift it straight up. Do you think it would be a bad idea to reach your finger down
No.
and lift up? Yeah, absolutely a bad idea, right? Another story I have, kid I went to college with. All right, this is somebody who was in school to be a shop teacher as well. Okay, he was more of a metal worker. He was in a woodworking class, just like this, and he had a board getting stuck on the jointer. So he reached his middle finger down and lifted the board up. All right, he did it once and he just got lucky. The second time, as that cutter was spinning, you guys can see it comes up in this direction. Okay, that blade on the upside caught his middle finger and just kind of nicked him. All right, now this dude was humongous. Big, tall guy, very strong. He turned completely pale white because he was in so much pain. All right, and he ended up getting it all bandaged up, and luckily it healed, but he does have a scar. Okay, is that accident preventable?
Yeah.
Totally, right? You don't put your hands near the cutter head. Now, worst case scenario, right? I talked about him getting caught by the upside of the cutter, right? Well, what if your hand touched the blade as it was going down? What do you think could happen? Okay, it could pull your whole hand down, right? And I got news for you, folks. People always talk about, well, a saw cutting your finger off. All right, if you get tangled up with a cutter head on a jointer, you've got nothing left but hamburger meat. Okay? And I don't say that to scare you. All right? But is that all preventable?
Yeah.
Yes. If you place your hands where they're supposed to be and you do this correctly, you will never ever get hurt. Okay? All right. So any questions before we get started with taking turns using the joiner. Okay, so as you guys come up, you're going to have your left hand, thumb on top, fingers down. Your other hand will be up top. Now, obviously, I can't wrap my fingers around the fence because this board is pretty wide. All right, and that's okay. We're going to run through nice and slow, and then you'll cycle back around and get back in line. Okay? Do you guys have any questions before we get started? Okay, you guys all did a great job. I can see, and this is totally normal, that many of you were very nervous, okay? And you know, you hear these gruesome stories, and then it's your turn to use the machine all of a sudden. If you were a little nervous, that's actually a good thing. If you're the type that said to yourself, this thing can't hurt me, you're the one who I have to worry about, okay? So if you're nervous, that's a good thing. You will gain a comfort level, okay? You'll be more comfortable as you use the machine. That doesn't mean you shouldn't be afraid of it, but you'll get used to using it, okay? Now, one thing I didn't talk about, we've got pretty big boards we were using today. What if I had to clean the edge up on this maybe 2-inch wide piece of wood? Do you think it would be very safe for me to do it the same way?
No.
No. All right, so anything 2 inches wide and less, we would grab a pair of these. Anybody know what these are called? Push sticks, very good. So what we're going to do is we're going to have one push stick up against the fence, the other push stick down against the bed, just like we were using our hands, and it's the same process. Okay? Much safer than just putting our hands that close to a cutter head, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. So let's do a quick review, and then we'll get our safety test out. All right. We have two tables here. These are called what? Anybody remember? Okay, beds. The in-feed bed and the out-feed bed. What do we call this thing that looks like a pork chop?
Pork chop.
The guard. Yeah, pork chop guard. All right. This thing right here is called what?
The fence.
Fence. And then what's the minimum length?
12 inches.
12 inches. Very good. Should our hands ever touch the bed?
No.
While the joiner's running? No. Is there ever a reason we would want to reach down and lift the board away from the cutter head?
No.
No, not close. If you grab your board and lift up, that's okay. All right. Do you stand in place or do you walk with your board as you go across?
Walk with your board.
Okay, you walk with it. All right. Let's see. Should your fingers ever hug the back of the fence?
Yes.
Yes, if possible, right? One thing we didn't really touch on, we did yesterday. What happens if you are distracted and something's going on? Should you look up?
No.
No, you always keep your eye on what you're doing, right? Is there ever a reason we need to touch the guard while the machine's running? No, it does its own thing, right? Let's see. Is there ever a time we would want to joint end green?
No.
No. Okay, very good. All right, guys, and what do we need to wear?
Safety vest.
You got it. Questions? All right, guys, thank you for your attention. Let's go do our safety test.